the city council portion at 6:03 p.m. And representative from the Arts Commission.
Okay, good evening. We're opening up the Duncanville Arts Commission joint meeting at 6:03 p.m.
All right, thank you very much. With that, I think most of the people in the room have been in the discussions that we've had. The most recent discussions we had that led to this joint meeting to discuss and to take a walk in the rain. So we'll see how that works out. It doesn't look like it's passing over, so we might be able to, maybe we'll get our feet a little bit wet, but we might be able to still get some done. Mr. Koontz, do you have a route that? Okay, so we got a route planned out, and we'll get to that in a minute. Well, we begin by public comments. First, item number 2. Do we have any public comments?
No.
None electronic? Okay, so no public comments. Number 3 would be our walking tour, which we'll talk about here in a minute, but mainly we wanted to kind of reiterate why we're here. And that is in part because after a meeting back, I believe in October, several of us sought out additional information because this adventure into being a designated cultural arts district is really exciting to me. I mean, the idea that we not only could establish that, which not a lot of cities have in the state of Texas, but also that we could open up to have some of the grant opportunities that are out there. That one was really interesting because it would answer a lot of money questions that we have relating to creating this district. And with that, and it's not anything that hasn't been discussed, but I'll briefly touch on it. Councilman Koontz and I had met with via Zoom with a representative from the Texas Arts Commission to talk a little bit more and ask a few more questions about some of the elements of this application and this process. And it became clear to us through that, not that Ron Thompson's presentation wasn't comprehensive, it's just that I think for hearing it the first time, I missed a lot, but I had a lot of questions as a result of that. So I sought it on my own to look into their website, and that even created more questions for me. And then Mr. Koontz and I had a conversation that ultimately led to us talking with an individual down there, which further enlightened us. So some of that is what we'll be talking about here today. And Mr. Koontz, since we're waiting to see if the weather allows us, do you want to go into discussion right now, or would you prefer that we, let me see what it looks like. We're almost out of the woods.
The sun was shining, but I was still sprinkling. I think we gave another 15 or 20 minutes.
Okay.
We should be able to clear. I mean, it's going to be humid.
Well, that's Texas, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to open the floor because you were part of the discussion with the representative. And we talked a little bit in front of the group, both the Arts Commission and the council. But Jeremy, why don't you go ahead and tell us some of your vantage point of what we learned?
Well, you know, so Texas Commission for the Arts, what they do is, you know, they set a standard for what a cultural district can be, and so a lot of the elements they put in there as far as the criteria just really sets a bar for just establishes a goal for cities to aim toward. And you know, just through our conversations with Michael DeRose, he's a program administrator for the cultural arts program, the cultural district program, and you know, that conversation really kind of showed that it's not just about the application, but cities having a goal of increasing opportunities to engage with the arts and increasing, obviously, tourism, economic stimulation through the arts, and all those things. But the cultural district program is to establish a standard, right, a goal. And so whether or not you have a successful application, you're starting to bring those elements into your city, right? That's the whole point of the program. And so we're looking at the application, and I think everyone has a copy of it, that it just gives us just some really objective guidelines for us to consider, just as we're considering, what do we want in our cultural district, what do we need to have a successful cultural district, and application has all those elements in it. And so I think it's beneficial for us, now that we have a little bit of time before we go out, maybe just kind of briefly look over the application. And then when we go out on our walk, to talk about some of the things that we have or don't have that meet the standards that are given to us in the application. And it's, again, the application itself just kind of gives us kind of a yes or no guideline. Do we have it or do we not have it? And if we have it, it's something that we can obtain in time. And so I know when we had this conversation the first time, most of us hadn't actually seen the application. And so now we have an opportunity to do that and look at what we have in light of the standards.
Yeah, one of the feelings that I got during the meeting, before I understood all of this, was that before we closed the door, at least temporarily, on creating an arts district that didn't have any of these features, once I looked at the application, once we met with Mr. Duro, was that the person?
Yes.
It became abundantly clear that when you get to the point of wanting to create the actual cultural district, so the first actually at page 3, it tells you what you have to have in that district in order to submit your application. You have to have those things, and they're to be within the district, not adjacent to or near. The only exception, I think, is hotels. Hotels can be within easy access through Uber or taxi or whatever. So that there's one mention there that in close proximity. Everything else within the district. So a food truck in the park for an event would be good to have for the event. And many of the events that we do have food trucks. But for the purpose of restaurants in the cultural district, it doesn't qualify. It has to be a standalone facility. So when I first looked at this, it became clear to me that if there wasn't a reason to wait, then the first example that we got, Mr. Kuntz's work, there's a diagram of an alternate plan for the district, opened my eyes to, well, why not? And that's what caused me to dig into it, because I saw what he was showing me, didn't know about this. And I'm not sure that a whole lot of us at this table knew about this application to the extent that it specifically spells out what you have to have in that district. But it goes further than that, because it's not just about what you have in the district, it's also about the managing entity that has to be created through a nonprofit, which I think Ron's already created. He's already created some bylaws, and I don't know that he's had a chance to really develop a fund strategy, but that has to be part of it, because that managing entity, which is required to apply, has to have a budget. And so where is that money coming from? That's, I guess, to be determined at some point. We're certainly not ready right now. Now, that managing entity, by the way, has nothing to do with us as council. That's an independent nonprofit that isn't really associated with the Arts Commission directly or the city directly. Doesn't mean that it can't be with the city manager. But that's a discussion that's going to be outside of council, because we're not a part of that. That is an entity of its own that is created, and Ron's already established some of the first steps in creating that. So our role on the council side was to agree on a designation, a designated area. And what we're coming back for is the realization of why not have in the designation what we need to get there now. Now, everybody said this, and it's true, there's no hurry, because you hurry this process. It's probably, by different people's opinions, it could be 3 years, Jeremy, is that what our, Mr. Duro said, possibly as soon as 3 years? Yeah, but certainly it's good. So you've got time to develop all this. But why not start out with all the pieces placed within the cultural district itself? That's my question, my opinion, that I came to a conclusion I had to ask, even after back to voting for a designated area being Armstrong Park. So, Jeremy, you want to go ahead and have any thoughts to that?
Yeah, well, as you're going through the application, I know something that just caught my attention, which was different from the discussions we had. It's like, if you look at section C, which is really just quantitative, do you have it or don't you have it? And there are questions there like number 3, current number of nonprofit art organizations physically located in the cultural district. And in our conversations with the program administrator, it seemed pretty clear that they have to have some kind of physical headquarters or offices, or somehow they're physically located, operating within the boundaries of the cultural district. So not just doing activities in the cultural district, but they're actually physically located there. And why that's specific, that's specified in the application. And then the same thing for like number 4, current number of nonprofit historical, cultural, and natural heritage organizations physically located in the cultural district. And I will say, I went back at some point and watched y'all's discussion when y'all voted on this, and discussion that you had, and not having the application in front of you, the questions that you were asking were actually questions that the application does ask. And so there were questions about, if we don't have restaurants within the area, would that count? And that's a question that's here on the application. There was a question about organizations that would be eligible for the grants and the funding, and that their physical location would have to be within the boundaries of the cultural district, for them eligible for those grants or those funding opportunities. And so, we had a conversation about this in the council, our most recent conversation, and as we started to think about whether or not we did need to expand the boundaries, we thought it important to bring the commission back into that conversation to kind of look at the assets that we have in the area to help us make a decision about whether or not to make that change.
One of the concerns that we had was also by expanding it, the sidewalks and so forth, because they're not 100%. I know that's something that we can be rectified over time, probably not extensive, but that was one of the reasons for the shortening of the district, was because it wasn't contiguous. So.
Well, I'm gonna agree with your assessment there, but the areas that I've identified and I haven't walked at all, but the areas I've identified that might be the best example of what you're talking about, my experience is that those could be remedied very quickly. It's just a matter of taking a sidewalk that isn't there, for instance, and adding a sidewalk, because right on the next property is a sidewalk, and it just ends because it's always been that way. There's never been a sidewalk there, so to add 30 or 40 feet of sidewalk is not insurmountable. So part of the reason we wanted to do the walk today was to kind of identify some of that. Accessibility is a big issue, accessibility for the disabled. So when you're walking, you're looking for those things, maybe an offset and 2 sections of sidewalk. But that's part of these growing steps to get here, is while we're talking about other features of applying for this, such as including the things that we've talked about already, it's also identifying those areas. I don't think there's a lot really, because for the most part, the park area has met all the accessibility standards for being able to leave one elevation of sidewalk and drop down by state law at the grade you have to drop down at. If it meant adding a few ramps for more convenience, again, I don't think it's impossible. I can't speak for the city manager on the funding part of this, But I don't see this as being a huge undertaking from what I've known from walking around in that area. But there definitely some things are lacking. One of the great things in talking with the gentleman down there is they're here to hold your hand and walk you through this process. They're available for any one of you to talk to them about any questions you have directly. And if, let's say, in 3 years, we make application and we're not able to check the box. For instance, one of the questions on here, I should have marked it on this copy, was 5 years of your nonprofit budget. Well, we don't have a track record of 5 years, but we would like to apply and say, Ron was saying 2027, that may be doable. And it almost doesn't matter at that point, because if you get turned down, the great thing about it is, it's not held against you that you applied and you didn't meet the standards. It will in fact kind of hold your hand and show you the things that maybe you should focus on and try to apply the next year. So they're there to help you get this designation. They want us to get this designation, but they can't get us there if we're not checking these boxes off. Sure. Well, anybody have any questions? Sure.
It's all in the past tense. It says your cultural district was established. So that's not their designation. That's just what we say, right?
That's us, yes.
So everything that we could do here, we can do at just whatever rate of time we need. It's my understanding.
That's absolutely the truth. With the objective being that at some point in time, and that's up to, I'm not sure that's up to the council at all. I think it's up to others to decide when they think they would like to be there. But you gotta look at this to kind of figure that out, because if you say I wanna be there tomorrow, you can see you can't be there tomorrow. But if you say I wanna be there in 4 years, will they say, or they ask the question, 5 years of budget in the nonprofit where you don't have that? I would say yes. I would say that they're not gonna cut you off because you don't have 5 years, but maybe you have 3 or 4 years. But you gotta have those pieces in place. And so that's that's one of the reasons we're here, is to talk about moving in that direction so that we'll get a jump start on that, rather than leaving it the way it is, and then maybe at the last minute, I have a terrible thing to say, because I don't think anybody's thinking in terms of last minute, but I'm thinking sooner than later. Others may think differently, and that's fine. However anybody wants to think about it, we just want to make sure everybody understands the application process and what our opportunities are, and what's the best opportunity for us to get there as soon as possible. But no rush. That's a great thing about this. There's no rush. Because to your point, we've already have our designation, and they want us to have that designation for some period of time, because then it shows that we were concerned enough to start building towards submitting the application. So the more we have, the better light I think that it sheds to them on our effort to get there. And that's, again, one of the reasons we're going over these criteria here.
Do we take off everything in section C?
No, Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong. There could be some things that you're not ready for yet, and I don't think one box would necessarily take out of the running, will it?
No, not at all. I mean, in different cities have different assets that they highlight. They have more, maybe they have more theater, maybe they have more on the museum side, right? Maybe they have more on the music side. And so I think when you look at, especially section C, there's not really a yes or no question. It's, the questions are current number of, right? And so when we're looking at, our boundaries, potential boundaries, if there's one set of boundaries that gives us 1 restaurant and another set of boundaries that gives us 6, then that might give us an idea, right? If there's one set of boundaries that gives us, 1 nonprofit organization, and another boundary that gives us 3 or 4, and that kind of helps us decide where we should set those boundaries, right? But I don't think, if you didn't have, say, an artist living quarters or residence, that would disqualify you if you didn't have it at all, because If you go to their website, Texas Commission of the Arts, they have a list of every city that has a designation. And you can go to their website and you can see all the different assets that highlight, and they're all different. They're very different. The cities are different sizes, and so, it's just looking at what we have and what we want to emphasize.
I'm gonna add too, back to the walkability issue. While certainly the walkability from the surface that you'd be traveling on is a serious concern, we have to make sure that everybody can move on the surfaces that get you from one place to another. There are limits, they're not set in miles, but there are limits to walkability as well. So, for instance, he gave us Houston as an example. Houston had 5 or 6 cultural arts districts, designated cultural arts districts. And one of the reasons being is because it was too far to walk in one of them. You've exceeded what they judged to be a limit that people can walk comfortably. So if we expanded the district that we've designated at this point, you have to keep that in mind. What are the boundaries for that? And I think we can, within reason, and for the example that Jeremy brought the night we decided on the Armstrong Park area, his had a reasonable walking area, for instance. Whether that could be expanded or reduced, that's up to everybody to decide, not for me. But I just wanted to explain that walkability has 2 aspects. Can you get there? Can everybody get there? With any kind of walking limitations they may have, but also just the average walker, can they travel that distance? And it doesn't include catching an Uber or a cab. It truly is walkability.
And that would include like lighting as well?
I don't remember that part. I would assume that that most of our areas have lighting, but I think it could probably be improvement. Again, a ka-ching for the city manager. But yeah, I think you want to look at the walkability for night and day, for the things that are open, or events that may be happening, to make sure people feel safe.
A lot of that area actually does have lighting, but what we've found, and you may have experienced this recently, there's a lot of streetlights out. I know myself and the police department have been really trying to pay attention to that and report lights out to Encore. All those lights are serviced by Encore. There's actually a way you can actually do that right through our website. I got an email today where 20 of our streetlights were just repaired over the weekend. They were out working on them on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So we're making progress on it, but so it may look dark, but there might be a light, it's just not working. So we're working on that. There was an entire stretch of Wheeling and Santa Fe and Main out that I think is now working.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Thank you, Mayor. So is the goal tonight to consider expanding the cultural district currently?
Well, it shows on our agenda to be a discussion. Since it does lead to discuss possible updated boundaries. I believe I came here under the impression that this was for informational purposes. I don't know that a decision has to be made tonight, but I wanted to make sure, I've had one private conversation with Ron Thompson early on about this endeavor here. Then we had a joint meeting. I think you were in the meeting. We talked about it again. And then at last meeting, we announced that we wanted to meet for this purpose, for the tour and for this discussion, because we wanted the Arts Commission to be in conversation, because you're as much a part of this as we are, because we're really only, well, we have a large interest in this. Our real piece in this is to have voted on a cultural arts district designated area, which we did. But after the fact, upon reading this and meeting with the gentleman, I realized, had I done that before the meeting, I probably would have, to be honest with you. And I wanna make sure everybody else heard that and understood that, because I don't know if it changes anybody else's mind. But it certainly should bring clarity, and I'm not saying that there was any, lack of information that was given to us, but it was given to us in a perspective that did not directly include the application and the process. And that's nobody's fault. This isn't to blame anybody, this is just to say, my personal feeling was strong after I got into this. We need clarity, and if others feel differently, that's fine. If they felt that they had enough information, that's fine. I'm not here to make it into an argument, I'm just saying, it meant enough to me to say, okay, it may not make everybody happy, but I have to have this conversation. I have to have it. And Jeremy, yes, ma'am.
And, so, the resolution we passed, it does allow for extension. It's not set in stone, it was something just to get us started. But, with consideration for future expansion as opportunities arise and deemed appropriate by steering committee and Duncanville City Council. So my thinking in asking that question was that, like I brought up at the last council meeting, to establish or kickstart the steering committee so they can go and compare the application to what we've done and then bring it back, because that would be a joint decision, for us to extend the boundaries. Again, I'm not opposed to extend, and I understand how we got to this conversation that we're having today. I just wanted to be noticed that it is in the resolution for that to be done, but it's in partnership with the steering committee and the council.
I don't want to disagree, but I will tell you that night, there was no discussion about the steering committee to the extent we were there that night to set the designated cultural arts district. There was no talk about, well, we're gonna have the steering committee be involved in this decision tonight. It was our decision, and again, I go back and say, had I had this information, and I don't know if any of you seen the document prior to the meeting that we had that night, do you recall?
No.
And so without the document, I don't, well, again, I'm gonna say it for myself. I wouldn't have made the decision I made that night, because I would have said, why wait? Why not go ahead and include it all now, so that we can start working on everything now, to start to build for 2 or 3 years from now when we wanna buy. We've already got a head start, we've already got it in place. And those people that are within that district now know they're in the cultural arts district. It may incentivize people to want to be within that district. It may excite people when they see those qualified, that they will at some point in the next 5 or 10 years, they will be eligible for some of these really impressive grants. Jeremy can speak to the grants more than I can, but they're impressive what people can get if they qualify. But I would have been saying, well, I don't want to wait, I'd rather go ahead and expand it, and have an expanded version of this now, because that night, Councilman McBurnett suggested that he could have 2 or 3 restaurants that were in his district included in the district if we expanded across the street. And that discussion just kind of came and went. So that's what I'm trying to do tonight, is just to say that it's there, it's still there for us. Go ahead.
Well, just one, it sounds like the rain has stopped, head out, and then 2, there's a resolution, so that could be something that, you know, after discussions, you decide if you want to amend the resolution, that's also a possibility.
Oh, ready for what?
Yeah.
we will continue our meeting. Thank you all for enjoying the walk with us today to look at some of the features of an expanded version, if we go that direction. Any questions or comments after our walk? Good. Mr. Coons, anything else?
Obviously. What's that? No. Yeah, there are a lot of things. You mentioned, talking about Central Elementary, which is the original location, original high school. There's a historic, the field there, Panther Field, it's kind of a historic asset. But yeah, there are a lot of things that I didn't mention. But, again, I would encourage you to just kind of take a look at the area, maybe look at some of the areas we didn't walk. And we got the application now. We're not making any decisions tonight, no action items tonight. I think it's, if you see it, we wanted to bring it back to the commission because if it weren't for you guys, we wouldn't be having this conversation, right? So you brought a great idea to us and we kind of looked at it and from council perspective, kind of more synoptic perspective, looking at other aspects of it. Now, thinking that maybe we want to ask you to look at it again, and I don't know, maybe at this point, we see if we have any further recommendations for us. I don't feel, as the mayor said, that I don't feel like there's any need for any rush. That's just me speaking for myself. I feel like when we look at our assets and our potential assets within the boundaries, for me, it's kind of a long-term, how do we develop the area to get to what we want it to look like, right? I think just walking around, we could all see things that could be, and so, how do we get there? And just doing everything, the right way in order to get to where we want to get. I don't feel like there's any rush to doing that, but.
Yeah, it's just additional information is all it is. And I believe, I'm really jumping out here, but I believe that if the time ever came where we wanted the person to be a Zoom, to have somebody from the state similar to the individual that we saw, the program administrator, talk to us, a group. Let's say that decision were made a year from now that we wanted to expand. I'm sure they would provide us that opportunity if we give them enough notice to answer questions. And you hear straight from them about what they'd be looking for. It's just about getting ourselves in the best position to advance to submitting the application. And as you can see by our checkboxes today, we're ways away. But as we build towards that, it gives us a better opportunity for maybe a first-time approval, maybe a second-time approval. But it's nothing to be afraid of if you don't get the designation the first time. Because like I said before, they seem very willing to coach you and try to help you build on the weak areas that you might have had in your application to get you there. They want us to get the designation, so that's a great part about it. I learned a lot.
Question?
Sure.
Because the McMillan Institute is already a 501c3, if y'all could look and see what needs to happen for access across that part of Beekman.
Well, the 501c portion of this does not have any connection with the council or the city. It's an independent, it's described in your information here. It's an independently run nonprofit. So the city doesn't fund it
No, I
necessarily.
mean, it is one, and so for it to already be within the district is what I'm saying.
That would
But to
be,
get over there, that's the issue.
Ron's already taken the initial steps to create. I don't know if he's actually got the designation, but that might, I know he's a big fan of the McMillan Institute. That might be a discussion for him to have with them to see if they can partner and fill that void.
It's the access that I'm interested in. So
Sure, and
you can
it
look into
may
that.
very, very well,
Do that.
by coincidence, it may very well fall into the expanded cultural arts
Yeah.
district.
Right, I think, that was one of our considerations as an arts commission, was Wheatland Plaza. Wheatland Plaza is now gonna have multiple, they're gonna have housing. They already have a 501c3, but then, some restaurants, we have a lot more coming in. Yeah, so there's an activity that that's shaping up there that would also help check a lot of boxes off, it feels like. You know, and then carry that maybe across the street, all the way up to the corner here, where you have, the Chamber of Commerce building. You also have the tax building for some future thing, who knows, might be, but if we designate an area that incorporates just what, we've been looking at and talking about, it gives us all of, okay, well, someday maybe that building, instead of being, you know, leased up like the tax building, instead of being used for X, now that we're thinking about it in terms of an arts and culture district, maybe it could be used for Y. And we keep in our future planning, you know, keep those kinds of things, so.
Yeah, I think the potential are, they're limitless. You know, I've heard Ron talk about a performing arts center, you know, taking buildings and doing things that I wouldn't necessarily think of. So y'all are the creative ones, and you're more directly involved with aspects of art that I'm not. I've gained a very large respect for the arts and a better understanding. Before all of this started, I didn't know food could be art, and now I do.
I like the giraffes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just, but I think we're all learning. A lot of us are picking up thoughts about the arts and the potential to develop an arts community within that designated district could feed and help, let's say, a problem that we see right now, and I don't want to get too far off track, but we've got a brand new, name of a new restaurant down here in South Main. Shell. They're standalone down there, by themselves in an area that nobody goes to eat unless you go to Cox Farms. Well, Jimmy's China restaurant is next door. But, you know, when this thing really takes off, it's gonna help develop in both directions. Even if that's not part of the cultural district, that far down, I can't help but think they'll benefit by it because of the amount of additional people that will be coming into the area. So while they're fighting an uphill battle to start, once people realize how good their food is, and if you haven't been there, I don't want to plug too hard, but they're brand new. They just had a soft opening a week ago, and it's got a great menu.
You're having a grand opening on Thursday.
Morning?
Thursday morning.
I have a question.
Yes.
Could Councilman Coons share his, map that he had presented with the boundaries that you were recommending at one time?
I can
With
share
the-
that
with the
with the city
council.
secretary.
With the committee?
And if you have ideas, you know, make your voices heard about any ideas that or something outside of what we looked at today, because we don't want to put a limit on it. You see the potential, it's out there, and by the time we get ready to submit an application, this thing could really be something special. So I'm excited about it.
There are a lot of things, you know, what Tim said, that there are a lot of decisions that we're making even right now with properties, zoning, codes, and things like that. And those decisions change in light of now this property or this building within the boundary of this cultural district, right? And you know, we are about to update the comprehensive plan, and the city manager had suggested doing some zoning that would also help with the designation. But I do feel like, even though we're not in a rush to make a decision, that you know, the sooner that we, maybe if we decide to expand, the sooner we do that, the better, because a lot of decisions that we're making right now you know, could go one way or the other depending on whether or not that's within the boundaries of the district, right? And so there's a couple of properties like the tax building that's owned by the city of Duncanville. We'll have an agenda item where we're discussing the use of that building here pretty soon. And if it's within the boundaries of the cultural district, that could alter that conversation, right? Of what we envision it to be. So I think that's a really good point. Just, you know, maybe coming to a decision sooner than later about the boundaries.
Yeah, in light of the development that our city manager told us about with an art museum that couldn't go in because of a restrictive zoning, what else is out there in our zoning right now that we're not aware would stop somebody else with a similar problem that we ran into there. So hopefully, the information we've gathered today will help, when they wrap up the comprehensive plan, they'll be identifying the problems we're creating for some businesses that we actually want, but current zoning doesn't allow it. So with a close examination of those rules and regulations, we can avoid that. Hopefully those folks haven't gone away. I don't know what the whole story is, but I did hear about it. But we'll avoid having somebody come in and say, well, no, that's gonna take me too long to get that changed. So they go somewhere else. So I'm sure that all will get covered.
I'll just add something. So I was asked, because we are, got 2 council members who are on that comprehensive plan steering committee, so 3. So, where are we as far as getting updates on?
Our next meeting, July 22nd.
I think June, was it June 19th or July 19th?
June 19th, but July 22nd is the big public hearing block party. So that's when everybody's gonna be invited, including the Arts Commission, all the boards and commissions, so everybody's in the same room at the same time down at the field pass on July 22nd. So we can hold the public hearing and go through the comprehensive plan.
It's exciting. The possibilities.
Then the fun stuff starts.
And
I just wanted to kind of echo what Mary Ann said. Mayor and council, as an arts commissioner, as a director of community theater, I am grateful that we have a council that's excited about the arts. That you're willing to show up on a Monday evening and walk, potential arts district and look at the things and talk about the sidewalks and the accessibility. And we get so excited, and I'm so grateful to Ron for igniting the flame and helping us all get excited about all of this. But it's okay to stop and go, wait a minute, we're really excited, but maybe we need to rethink this a little bit. That's okay too. And I'm just grateful for that. And I wanted to say thank you for all of the thought and all of the input, because I think we're looking at a really cool thing. The theater has been at one of South Main since 1988, and we've seen a lot of changes. We were there when there was a city hall next to us and a grassy area and a gravel parking lot behind us. And to have seen all the changes and all of the growth, I'm showing my age, but I can see the potential for the future growth as well. And I think that slowing it down a little bit and getting it right, there's nothing wrong with that. And it doesn't take away from anything that we've done, but I just wanted to thank you guys for what you've done for the arts in Duncanville.
anything else on the walking tour and the discussion? So we'll wrap that up and we'll go to item B. And,
I will try to make this quick.
okay.
So in front of you are the arts funding policy and grant guidelines. This also includes an application. The intent of the Arts Commission in creating this was to not only take just the parameters of the arts fund policy, but to create a method from which that they can execute it responsibly. They initially set up a subcommittee, so they did a lot of the research and pulled a lot together that went into this. And then on April 22nd, the Arts Commission reviewed and discussed the fiscal year 25-26 parks and funding policy. They made some changes, and then they voted in favor of recommending that City Council adopt this policy. Being uncertain how long this would take to get through the process, I focused on an entire fiscal year, which is why the fiscal year 25-26 is there. And then after they approved the one, I created a 24-25 for you also to consider. They were aware that this was going to go to the city attorney and the city manager to make any other revisions before it came to you. And here it is. Some highlights of it. Under funding sources, pages 3 and 4, it does cover both hot and non-hot funded, non-hot funding requirements. On pages 4 and 5, you will find there are 3 grant categories, which includes annual arts programs, single projects, and public arts grants. And what I've given you is the red line version, because this, in some cases, will be the first time the Arts Commission has seen those edits. But one of the revisions that the city manager asked that be made to this was that the Duncanville Arts Commission reserves the right to consider exceptions to the stated funding limits on a case-by-case basis, to give them a little bit more flexibility. On the grant cycles laid out in here, the Arts Commission meeting for reviewing grant applications is posted as a TBD, because there will be a new Arts Commission possibly appointed, and these will have to be determined as they come closer. The schedule that is set inside the 25-26, and even with regards to payments on 24-25, I've worked that out with fiscal services so that we can be timely with this. At the back of the application, I'd like to point out that the grantee responsibilities on page 8. Most cities that we looked at had put responsibilities back on the grant applicant. So some of those responsibilities that they put back on there allows us to collect information that we can use to adjust the program as it goes forward. The application at the back, I'll be able to do an online form which I can embed in the website, people can fill out right there. I'll also include a fillable PDF that people can download and then fill in their own time. And that is my major highlights.
Mr. Hamby, the basic differences between the two documents really relates to
The only real difference in the one is the 24-25, and then the schedule. The schedule only has one grant cycle, and by the time this comes to you, which will be the first meeting in June, we won't be able to have that marketing and info session, and I still need some time to design that, to build that out.
So it's an application procedures and grant cycle schedule.
Yes.
Okay.
I just want to sing the praises of the Arts Commission on this funding policy. I reviewed it prior to the meeting, and it has all of the necessary components for policy to be successful. And I believe that you're setting up the next Arts Commission, giving them a good start on setting your quarterly evaluation of the applications, and then the funding process, and putting the responsibility back on the applicant of being able to provide you the data that's needed. I think that's good, because we can then start tracking and seeing trends and what is the return on our investment per se, and being able to track that, and especially if it's going to contribute to the cultural district, that's data that will be needed for the application. So everything that you've included in here, I want to commend you all on saying it was a great job. Also, thank you for reaching out to Mr. Richard Jackson and sitting with him and asking him about funding policies. You educated yourself. You didn't just create an arbitrary, nice to do type policy. You really did your homework and your research, and you came forth with what I would consider a good product. So, well done. Good job.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
I do want to thank the Arts Commission as well, because since the start, you've done a lot of work, and it's definitely commendable for what it is, and there's still obviously a lot of work to be done. But thank you. To me, it's still y'all's baby, and take care of it and keep bringing things forward. So thank you.
Yeah, I would say that I've not seen a commission get created and take off the way this one has. To Ms. Gooden's point, be dotting the i's and crossing the t's along the way, to where it is something that's gonna be their future Arts Commission members that come on board years from now and beyond that. So you set a foundation that will really, well, first off, again, I've never seen the likes of it in the creation of the committee. We've had some that have floundered, trying to get membership and trying to get, going off in the right direction. This one didn't flounder, this one took off. We don't know why, We had Mr. Speed the Light at the helm, and so kudos to him and to y'all for making this so successful. It's really impressive. Really impressive. And with that, thank everybody again for indulging us in the walk. It turned out beautiful weather. Jeremy timed this all perfectly. I hope you do. And we got to see a lot of good things today and talk about a lot of good things. So thank you all very much. And if there's no further business at this point, then we will stand adjourned. So we come at
7:41.
You got an Android?
Yes.
7:41.
Dr. The Arts Commission, we will adjourn the meeting at 7:41. Have a